Welcome to Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie, where we explore the questions, stories, and experiences that shape who we are and who we are becoming. I'm Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. Let's dig in.
The Bronx, circa 1982, by Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. I'm always thinking of that place, the hood that nurtured me and helped to shape me into the girl I am and becoming. I have always held you close, wrapped in my arms of blazing fire and ashes. I knew you before you knew yourself. I saved you when others wanted to throw you back to the ashes from which you rose. Like a phoenix, you came rising and rushing toward the midnight sky. The Bronx, the place that raised me, the place that has given me my sensibilities. And Dr. Angel Acosta and hermano, you know a little something about the Bronx, don't you?
I do. The Bronx held me for almost a little over a decade.
Mm.
I lived in the Bronx for a long time with my family, right on Kingsbridge, 225th, and I went to middle school and part of high school in the Bronx, Walton High School, right on the reservoir off the 4 train.
That's right, Walton. You know what? I was thinking about Taft, but there were a few famous people that went to Walton too. Taft had James Baldwin, or was it Walton? I got to get my facts straight, but I know James Baldwin, County Cullen, it was quite a few famous Bronxites, and so you're among them.
I don't claim, you know how New York is in terms of territory. You gotta like live in a place for like 50 years to be able to claim sets, territorial sets. So Walton, I was there for a year, and I was imprinted psychologically with the intensity of a 2,000 student school in the Bronx. But then I moved to a smaller school in the Lower East Side, which is a lot more healthy for me.
Mhm. Yo, LES, Lower East Side, that's where I was for about 22 years of my life. So, Angel, it makes so much sense. Not only that we're friends, brothers and sisters, but that you are the very first guest on the Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie. Thank you, and welcome everyone for tuning in with us. I am so grateful to have me, hermano, my brother, my provocateur, co-designer of the racial literacy model, the person who snuck into my classroom. I don't know how many years ago, Angel, was that? Disguising, 10?
Almost 10, yeah.
Disguising yourself as a student and really being one of my most profound teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing over the past decade, Angel, of bridging the fields of leadership and justice and mindfulness. You hold a doctorate in curriculum and teaching at Teachers College, which is, I think that's where we met. It feels so long ago. Feels like we met in another lifetime. And you've supported educational leaders and teachers by really helping them understand the environments they need to create so that their students can flourish. Your bio has so much more, but I would have to say what it stands out for me the most, at least at this phase in my life, is the creation of the Acosta Institute, for which you gently and generously pulled me into. And it really has changed my life. It's changed my life as you've introduced me to mindfulness and brought me into that world, but also into the world and the beauty and the creativity and the innovation of the Acosta Institute. So I just really want to start out by thanking you for that work, welcoming you to Dig Deep. And I'm not sure where this is going to go, but I know that I have my archaeologist sweatshirt on, or whatever they call it. I'm old school. I call it sweatshirt. Anyway, I'm ready to dig. How about you?
Yeah. No, thank you so much, sister. Always a pleasure to do anything for you, with you. Just to give even more context, we've also been traveling around the country as well the last few years, from Esalen to Washington to Michigan. Like, but sometimes I gotta be like, wow, like, you'll we, but we're moving at such a gentle yet profound speed that it all kind of just like disintegrates. Like, did we go to Michigan? Were we at Esalen teaching a workshop off the cliff of the Pacific coast?
That land is magical.
Big Sur. Well, close to Big Sur.
Even you mentioning it gives me chills.
But congratulations on the book. I think it's an incredible asset to the community. Just really, I'm honored that this is the first episode. I got a chance to kind of reread a little bit of chapter 1 and 9 for this conversation. And I have some things to say around your work and the significance of the book. So anywhere you want to start, really.
I want to start really at the beginning. And you mentioned chapter 1, and that was a deliberately focus on autobiographical. That was deliberate and paying homage to the Bronx and what the Bronx taught me, and also the Bronx being my first teacher of like racial literacy. What I'd love to know from you, knowing and how you know me and how you help me conceptualize the visual for the racial literacy development model and the journey that you've been taking with me. When you read that chapter, what is perhaps underneath my story that may not be mentioned in terms of the mindfulness journey? What is a way that perhaps the Bronx might have influenced that way before I expected it? I don't really know what the question is. I just know, Angel, that you have a way of seeing me, seeing my work, and seeing what's underneath. So I know it's a bit of a weird question, but what do you think was missing in that chapter as I tell the story about the Bronx and it being my first teacher?
Oh, yeah. And I think what was there for me was just your embrace of the Bronx, your full embrace, because oftentimes we develop all kinds of interesting relationships with where we come from when we end up in these high places like Columbia. So shout out to you for continuing to embrace the Bronx continually. I just felt your passion for the Bronx, the poetry that kind of allows you to articulate that love, the leveraging of that notion of the danger of a single story. When we look at the Bronx and we just think about it as a one-dimensional place that's dysfunctional. And so I really appreciated you kind of pushing back against a single story of the Bronx. And then the history, looking at the Cross Bronx Expressway and Robert Moses and the ways that structurally often the Bronx experienced things that burned it, literally. So I just appreciated you giving that kind of historical context and like nestling yourself in that fire. And then positioning racial literacy development as a tool for liberation. That's what comes out for me in terms of what was there. As far as what wasn't there, even though when you had Olivia, you were in Manhattan already, there's something about your experience mothering that's interesting for me in terms of your experience, not just in the Bronx, but through the Bronx. You taught night school, you adopted many people even before Olivia came through. You always had a motherly role in people's lives or auntie role, right? So I'm just curious around how not just your notion of racial literacy, but your relationship to the love ethic that comes out of the Bronx shaped how you've been an auntie, how you've been a stepmother, and how you're a great mother. In fact, it's funny because Dr. Edmond, one of my dear colleagues,
Mine too.
He'll say literally, Yolie's my academic mother. So there's something to mothering that is, I think, underneath that first chapter.
Wow. Popping my head on the first episode.
You asked.
Oh my gosh. And you know something what's so wild, Angel, is that as you were speaking, the answer was coming to me. It is because I believe that we were not loved. And when I say, I'm not talking about each other, we loved each other. We loved each other to create what we created. You have to love the people around you to see the brilliance and the genius to create something like hip hop and the elements of that. It was the way society positioned us. And I think sometimes this is all like, I don't know where this is coming from. It could be all subconscious. When you don't get what you want to make sure that you give it to others. Now, let me be clear. I was loved in my community. I was loved in my family, not so much at school. I do remember one teacher that I'm still in contact with from 8th grade. That tells you everything about that. If I can make the bridge, the connection, when I was in my doctoral program, there's certain things I didn't get, that I didn't know that I needed. But when I came out of that experience and I became a professor, I became an advisor, I wanted to give all that I did not receive. So I think somehow like my mind, my spirit is functioning in that way to advise or to mother or to love in a way that perhaps was absent from society. And it's still absent because there's certain communities that are not loved. I mean, hell, the times that we're in, there's certain people straight up that are not loved by this so-called society that's supposed to be like looking out for everyone, equality and justice for all. Let's sit with that some more. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I want to turn to you a bit, right? And there's so much, Angel, in your life. You're an incredible father. You always talk about Sid being this little dragon, and indeed. And you also recognize that Sid is your teacher. And I love to watch the two of you together, right? The way that you communicate. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything. You just give them like a look. We know that. So I am grateful to have been in your life to see this emergence of this dragon come into your life and how he continues to enhance you. I've also been in your life where I have witnessed the passing of your father. So here you are, your father, you're in the middle, and then Sid is the next generation. What I've noticed in that, this period of time with the passing of your father, the emergence of your son, is the way that you give through the Institute. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Why the Acosta Institute? Why not taking the traditional, you had a banging dissertation, still waiting for it to become a book. Not the traditional method, be a professor and teach mindfulness. Why the Acosta Institute? And why did you pull me into it?
No, thank you for that question, sister, and acknowledging my father and my fathering. I was driving yesterday. It felt like a poem, but it felt like more like a bar. I'm speaking of the Bronx and hip hop, it felt like more like a bar in regards to my father and fathering. I can't pull it right now verbatim, but the spirit is in your question. And yeah, you've been instrumental in terms of me understanding my role as a father too, for my son Sydney. I'm trying to slow down because so much of the Acosta Institute, as much as it was a big decision that I made after my dissertation, which you were part of as my second chair. And I also want to connect it to this current book, which is really, for me, the most academic, long form attempt for you to archive the archaeology of self and the racial literacy development model. But we also want to acknowledge that the archaeology of self is an artifact of the vortex, and that that poetry book you wrote, Love from the Vortex, even though that book is about your relationship and navigating love in particular, but the archaeology of self really comes out of that vortex. So sometimes I sit with your work as around like the archaeology of self and Love from the Vortex, and it's like, was she digging and engaging in the archaeology of self, and then Love for the Vortex comes out, or was she in the vortex and then the archaeology of self emerges? In particular, in her relationship to the academy and her research and her practice and her teaching and her consulting. It doesn't matter actually, because they blend together. But what the key thing is that the notion of artifacts, and that as we dig and engage in like the archaeology of self, we sometimes develop artifacts like poem, a kind of something that stays
Yes.
after like digging up and exploring your biases and critically reflecting and sometimes interrupting. And across the book, many of the listeners will come across ways that other teachers have taken up the model and have played and created artifacts. Like that deck of cards in one of the later chapters is a really good example. But I would say that the Acosta Institute was an artifact of my dissertation, an artifact of my relationship with you, and also a broader artifact around my views on the academy and its limits and its limitations. A deep respect for the academy and the ways that it produces and generates knowledge. And also, sometimes it can be a bit rigid. And what does Dr. Emden say sometimes around rigor?
Rigor mortis.
Rigor, yeah, rigor's not too far from rigor mortis and being dead. So, and then also, so I wanted to create something new. And part of the story is I was actually cornered because the pandemic hit and the academic job market wasn't as robust. So there is another universe where the pandemic didn't happen. And I graduated in a kind of a relatively normal historical moment. And I went off and became a professor somewhere, maybe got on tenure track, maybe had that. But the way that the conditions were there, um, I had to make a decision, a genuine decision around the environmental pressures and economic pressures, and then also trying to take advantage of this incredible research around healing-centered education that came out of that. And so the Acosta Institute really is just a stewing, a composting of all that. And at this point, our mission is to explore healing-centered education, business, and technology. Originally, it was just healing-centered education, but we've slowly grown to explore what does it mean to run and build healing-centered businesses? What does it mean to think about healing-centered approaches to technology, especially artificial intelligence? But always our core has been healing-centered pedagogy.
My gosh. There's so much that I want to ask from that. There's two major ideas that emerge, and I'm going to see if we can fit this in, because then I have some rapid response questions that I want to get to with you. As I was listening to you, for some reason, it also hit me the work that you did immediately before Acosta Institute and how it was a through line in so many ways in your work. And what I'm referring to is the 400 years of inequality.
Oh.
And just be patient with me as I try to frame this question, that we are now in a time where history is being erased. And that is not hyperbole. Literally, I saw on TikTok 2 weeks ago, a school in Sarasota, Florida, thousands of books in the dumpster, like books by and about Indigenous folks, by and about Black and Latino folks, literally erasing that history. And here you were at the 400th anniversary of inequality, 1619 in this country. We know the 1609 in Britain. And you work with a team of people to create this timeline. And thank you for pulling me into that work, because we have engaged thousands of people into this timeline like a walking meditation. So here's the connection I'm making, right? You've got Acosta, where you're engaging people in meditation. The work before that, where you're engaging people in 400 years of history, often painful moments of history. So I'd like for you to make a connection, Angel, if you will, about the work of tracing history, holding on to history, even when it's painful, and what mindfulness can do to help us understand it, mitigate it, and possibly reshape anew, or perhaps with the idea of futurity, to somehow alter the direction so that we don't repeat it.
Yeah, I don't forget about that work, but it's so intense that I'm just letting it rest.
Yeah, it was a lot.
We have to have these physical timelines that we'd lay on the floor and have people walk through them. And I remember calling them kind of dragons. So just acknowledge Dr. Mindy Fullilove, Robert Fullilove, and several other folks from the new school who were part of the 400 Years of Inequality committee. I was actually in a course, I was auditing a course at the new school with Dr. Fully Love. Really on, I don't know if I had registered for her class yet, but it was on big data. But she invited me to join the committee and just listen, see if I could contribute. And they had this 400-year timeline that was in connection to this 2019 commemoration of the arrival of enslaved Africans to Jamestown in 1619. And it was a community oriented project that would just have these dates and images that really you could visually, if you just took your time and read, you could like really feel the ways that our country has a really complicated and complex history. And in holding all of it, one of the themes that came up was this ecology of inequality that oftentimes crisscrossed with American empire. So it was if you really sat with the timelines, you would be like, wow, like how much we've been through, how much dysfunctional things happen in our history. And then also you could feel the resilience and the little like spokes and bursts of resistance that give us the texture of our democracy, even if it's under conditions right now. That work allowed us to just walk people through 400 years of history. And my contribution was very simple. Like, I didn't produce the timelines. I just said, I think that before people do the timeline, there should be a sit. It was a simple but radical suggestion. It was like, why don't you just slow people down before going in?
Yes.
And then I remember Dr. Fully Love looked at me and was like, all right, you do it. I was like, what? That's such a classic Mindy thing to say. She was like, oh, that's a good suggestion. Why don't you do it? And I was like, all right. So I designed this contemplating 400 years of inequality project initiative that was just an addendum to the larger project. And I started to facilitate community meditations before going into the timeline, and did it virtually, did it in person, traveled all over the country with the timelines.
And a set of timelines are in Teachers College Everett Lounge on the walls.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they were taken down. They're not there now, but they were there for several years.
They were there for several years.
That's an example of like, the fingerprint of our work and our relationship too. And then the last thing I'll say is that work was so powerful and so intense that when I felt I was complete with it, I could never go back. I haven't been able to go back. I always ask myself like, oh, is it time? And not yet or not at all, but it was extraordinary.
And thank you for your contributions. And it's a beautiful next question, last question, because we're talking history, or you just shared the 400 years. And now we want to talk a bit about futurity. And I want to talk about the work of the Acosta Institute. You mentioned it just a moment ago, just kind of put it out there, AI, right? And the Acosta Institute has been doing some incredible, even before we were steeped into AI the way that many of us are being forced to now. You were engaging the public with these opportunities, holding summits, sessions, free for people to understand. Can you talk a little bit about that and why AI, why the Acosta Institute bringing in some of the best minds, and I want to say, for the most part, some of the best minds of color, right? Talking about this topic that is so much part of our everyday, now, present, but clearly is going to be part of our future.
There's some really strong connections between AI and the archaeology of self too, which I talked a little bit.
And that's chapter 9, by the way. And that incredible image by Samar with her quantum artwork.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to AI, I think that we want to view it as not just a technology, for technology, like the internet, like fire, but we want to also view it as language, as a new language in and of itself. So there's a connection between the ways that we treated literacy to indigenous and Black people in the United States pre-emancipation. They were there. You wanted to avoid enslaved folks from learning how to read. The main point here is that when a technology like this emerges, you want to give people as much access to understanding the ethical limitations and the ethical issues around it, the privacy, the existential risks. But you want to give community the full gamut of the literacy needed to navigate this moment, from ethical use,
Yes.
tool use, and infrastructure building, because the reality is that there are communities right now that are using these tools to aggregate resources, aggregate wealth, aggregate attention, build infrastructure. And why shouldn't we be able to do the same in right relationship, in integrity? So, in fact, we built racial literacy Archaeology of Self model. We leveraged it and played with it and built a community-centered AI literacy model.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What does it mean to think about AI from in terms of critical humility, historical literacy, interruption? We could call it even algorithmic harm, interrupting algorithmic harm. And then we added one tenet, which is critical play. Right? You got from critical love all the way up. Critical play. How do we play with these tools in a critical way that allows us to honor the environment? We know that the use of these AIs consumes a lot of water and extracts a lot of mineral from the planet. And at the same time, we can use them and be in right relationship. I don't think we should not engage at all.
Yes, and thank you for all of that. I also want to acknowledge what I wouldn't exactly say offsprings, but I'm thinking about the work of Mind Heart AI Collective, Dr. Sarah King and Kirsten, I forget Kirsten's last name, but this incredible work that they're doing, where you talked about critical humility, you talked about critical play, but they're really centering what I would call critical love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really engaging people in understanding AI and using the affordances of AI from an ethical, I would dare even say loving like approach, right? Specifically to communities of color. So again, Dr. Sarah King and Kirsten, who have both been repeated teachers at the Acosta Institute, they're really leading in this kind of ethical AI, right? Connecting AI, artificial intelligence, and the original AI of ancestral intelligence, and really having us understand that we have to pay homage to those communities and not just take from them, that we can move forward in an ethical way. So thank you for that. And others who are connected in their own universe, but also come through the Acosta Institute that I'm also seeing and are now leading their own workshops around AI, that they've been pulled in as fellows of the Acosta Institute and now going out and teaching others. So again, just thank you for your work. Thank you for being my brother. Thank you for your friendship and your brilliant mind. All right, you ready for some like rapid response? They're not going to be like cute. Like, you know how some of these podcasts are like, what song are you listening to? You now? None of that.
Mm-hmm.
All about literacy or hearing and pulling it back to the book. So, what's one racial literacy lesson you learned outside of school that shaped how you lead?
It would have to be around imposter syndrome and kind of that practice of like digging deep. How do you exercise or like, I'm not sure if the word is excise or extract white supremacy from your bones enough to believe in yourself?
Mm. Say that again for the people who might have walked away from the podcast. Say it again for them.
Like, how do you strain? How do you expunge white supremacy enough from your soul and psyche to believe that you are somebody?
Have your genius emerge that's already there.
And then allow that awareness that you belong, that your intelligence matter to do what you got to do. And in my case was to decide that I didn't want to go the academic route, right? So not going the academic route and moving into the Acosta Institute is actually an artifact and a embodied example of me having like, oh wow, I am worthy. I have something to contribute. And my intelligence can be a resource.
Mm. Okay, let's take that and let's connect it to the next rapid response, which is what's a belief that you had to excavate about yourself to become a healing centered leader? Now, it could be connected to expunging white supremacy or not, but what's a belief? Talk about that.
It's actually a simple response is staying healing centered because so I think that there's this obsession with arriving at healing that we put this pressure on ourselves. And then that pressure can result into like some savior complex or burnout. So for me, just constantly being healing centered and knowing that I'm gently just trying to hold the possibilities of myself and others to become more whole in this process. For me, it's like a gentle holding of the promise of healing as a destination, as opposed to this pressure to arrive.
Right, give me a second. Do this to me every time. Last rapid response. Finish these statements. Healing without justice is.
Healing without justice is a dream deferred.
Justice without healing is.
A broken promise.
Anything, hermano, you want to share?
That was hard. These are not hard questions. This is like.
It's all dig deep for a reason.
Yo.
We didn't come to play.
My neurons are not firing anymore.
Well, no, those answers are beautiful and thoughtful and so reflective of who you are. So, hermano, as we close out, anything you want to share about yourself, about the book? I have one last statement that I want to make, but as my inaugural guest, my guest in just period, you go first.
I've only said this a few times across the different moments that we've been able to teach together or maybe introduce you, but I think it's important as people read this book and sit with all that it has to offer, that it's also connected to the legacy of abolition and the contribution of Black feminist thinkers and scholars, not just, of course, Toni Morrison, Lani Guinier, and the many Black women in the Black tradition and the Black feminist tradition who have just dished off love after love after love. I can just trace back the hands of Sojourner Truth. I can trace back the curved back of Harriet Tubman. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is not just a publication that emerges even out of Yolie's archaeological dig into herself and into her work, but is actually a longer clarion call.
And I want to thank you for that and for writing the afterword. So listeners and potential readers, you will have the opportunity to hear more of the brilliance of Dr. Acosta in the afterword of the book. And the only thing that I want to really share is that I didn't write this to sell books. I know that sounds strange, right? Because you write a book, you want people to buy it because you want people to read it. I wish that I could give books away for free. That's actually one of my deep desires. But what I do want is for people to pick up this book and to have the full experience. It is not just a book. Every author will say, oh my gosh, I gave so much. I really put my soul into this. From the curated playlist to choosing the specific photos that represent the titles of the chapters, to the artwork. When I tell you I have over 10 years of artwork from students, to carefully go through 10 years and to select only 5, to have teachers from all over the country submit lesson plans, over 45 of them, and to only select 6 for the book. The others will be made available for free digitally. So this book is an artifact of my archaeological dig on who I am right now as a mother, as a woman, as a daughter, as a friend, as a scholar. And it's all packaged in this title called Archaeology of Self, the Introspective Educator's Guide to Racial Literacy. And I hope, reader, that you will find value in it. And that's it. Thank you, hermano. Thank you for being on Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie.
Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you so much for joining me on Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie. Until next time, stay curious, be gentle with yourself, and keep digging deep.